Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now let's talk about the crippling anxieties of mass abductions and Nigeria's fearful and aggressive reaction to the surge in such terror attacks as it pursues security in a chaotic world, a world that's left many families and communities in a state of horrified uncertainty. In response, the Senate is proposing imposing the death penalty on kidnappers. Proponents argue it's a necessary measure to deter this heinous crime, which has claimed thousands of lives and drained billions of naira in ransom payments. They believe extraordinary crimes warrant extraordinary punishment, and the state must demonstrate strength against terror. But critics, including human rights advocate Professor Uche Emelonye, caution that capital punishment has not been proven to curb crime, and Nigeria's justice system, which is prone to wrongful convictions, shouldn't be trusted with irreversible justice. So is the death penalty the decisive step Nigeria needs, or a shortcut that jeopardizes justice, human rights, and international obligations? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the former UN Human Rights Advisor, Professor Uche Emelonye, who is currently a visiting Professor of Human Rights Law at Bournemouth University in the UK. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
As you know, the Nigerian Senate is considering introducing the death penalty for kidnappers. What's your take on this proposal? Do you believe the death penalty is an effective deterrent against kidnapping in Nigeria?
I will say no, because the death penalty reintroduction into the criminal punishment in Nigeria is looking as an afterthought. It happens when the kidnapping has happened. But we should look at what happens before the kidnapping happens.
Yeah, but shouldn't it be both?
Not necessarily. In terms, there should be a sequence. The first in the sequence should be preventive and not punitive.
Yeah.
So,
but there's crime and punishment.
Yes.
When there is a crime and people escape through the net, you can't be 100% absolutely clean up your society and there's no crime. When those people slip through the net and you can't catch them, there's punishment.
But what should be the focus of the state? If we have limited resources, why should we apply it? It should be applied on preventive measures.
No, but you're saying it as though everything Nigeria is doing is simply, in the Senate, where they're going to condemn people where they're going to pass a law for, death penalty for kidnappers. I mean, you've also got the preventive measures that you're talking about. You've got the army, you've got the police, you've got all kinds of people out there trying to stop the thing from happening.
No, the point at hand is that the Senate is legislating to impose death penalty on kidnapping. My school of thought is the Senate should be preoccupied with legislating preventive measures. In the interim, ultimately, punishment will come. And I could give you instances of punishment in Nigeria that never worked. The ninth Senate moved kidnapping from 10-year imprisonment to life imprisonment. And that happened in 2020. And I want to take a caveat. I'm not indicting the current government. But the question I will put to Nigerians is, are we safer now between 2020 and 2025? Is kidnapping reducing from 2020 to what it is now? So by the fact that we've introduced life sentence on kidnapping without addressing the preventive aspect, which I'm pushing for, Nigeria is not safer. So what the Senate is trying to do again is to raise the threshold from life imprisonment to death penalty. And my proposition is we are moving in the wrong direction. The right direction is, first and foremost, address the preventive measures and the enablers of this crime to happen in Nigeria.
Well, I don't have a survey or a poll in front of me, but person on the street interviews that media houses have conducted suggest that your opposition to the death penalty is out of touch with the Nigerian public's desire for harsh punishment for kidnappers?
I do agree. In my last interview, somebody wrote in the comment box that this is a confused professor in the UK who does not understand the reality in Nigeria. But that is not true. I am as Nigerian as he is. The point that I'm trying to make is to look at what is the first port of call for any reform towards the justice system in Nigeria. It is not the severity of the punishment. It is the preventive nature of the punishment. Criminals everywhere in the world are deterred more by the likelihood of being caught than the likelihood of being punished. So it's been proven. So it's not my theory. Anywhere in the world. And I mean, there's also this instance that it has worked in other climes. It has worked in China, it has worked in the US, and so on and so forth. But we're making a mistake. The claim is not the same as Nigeria. Our security architecture is completely different and weakened. That what makes those aspects of intervention work in those countries relates to surveillance and effective policing, which we lack in Nigeria. So we cannot export that theory that it works in China and we'll bring it into Nigeria. Particularly, if I may remind you, and also remind Nigerians, that death penalty is in our body of law on robbery. Death penalty is in our body of law on murder. And I can tell you that the last execution in this country was in 2016 by Governor Adams Oshimole. He is the last person that signed the death warrant. And if it works, why are other governors not signing it? If it works, is Edo State safer than other states in Nigeria? So, I mean, there are empirical evidence to say that whereas the severity of punishment will deter, but what is more effective, and particularly in the context of Nigeria, is how do we prevent the level of arms infiltration in Nigeria? How do we prevent the fact that people can ask for ransom with phone numbers? The essence of having numbers registered formally is to prevent and show accountability. That has been breached. We should be looking at that instead of looking at raising the severity without addressing the enablers that makes this crime very feasible.
There's also an argument to support what you're saying, which is that the Nigerian justice system is so full of inefficiencies that it makes it ill-equipped to implement the death penalty fairly, and that we simply can't trust the Nigerian government to carry out executions justly, given the country's history of wrongful convictions and human rights abuses. Is that how you see it?
Before I even critically look at the judiciary, let me give them a bit of credit. Every year in this country, the courts issue death penalty that already exists in the law. So it's not the issue of the courts. The judges will rule a judgment. They will give judgment on armed robbery and on murder. Statistically, it says that every year there's approximately 500 judgments on death penalty in this country. So people move to death row every year. The point that needs to be analyzed is execution. Why is it that I can tell you the last execution, 3 last executions in the country? The first one was 2016, Edo State, Adams Oshimole. The next one was 2013, Edo State, Adams Oshimole. And the third was 2006 in Kaduna, Plateau, and Enugu. You could see that if we have death row inmates numbering close to 4,000 without execution, all that we are doing or we will do by introducing death penalty is to have more people going into the death penalty role without essentially making our streets safer. My argument is to make our streets safer. My argument is to make Nigerians safer.
Right.
It is not to ensure that people who do a crime are punished, but rather people are not able and capable of implementing that crime.
Yeah, but as I said, and as many people would say, it's got to be both ways. There's got to be punishment for crimes, but also attempts to make sure that crimes don't happen in the first place. But let me make this point, because it's important for people to understand where you're coming from, because you yourself had a personal experience with kidnapping, and to some extent that informs your views on the subject. Tell us about that.
About 3 years ago, I thought I was coming back to Nigeria for vacation. And the same day I landed, the same evening, a distress call came. My brother was kidnapped. And it was a very violent kidnap. I would consider him as privileged because he had a police orderly. His police orderly was shot, he was disarmed, and his master, who is my brother, taken.
Did his orderly survive?
Yes, he survived
Good.
eventually. Thank God he survived. But he was disarmed, and I mean, the records are clear that his arms was taken. It now became my responsibility to lead the family to go through the process of making a contact. Eventually, the contact came. It was my difficult responsibility to negotiate with these kidnappers on ransom. It was my difficult responsibility to deliver the ransom. That took more than 5 hours in moving from one point to the other. And I resonate with every Nigerian who must have passed through this process. But what was clear in my mind is not thinking of how to punish these people. It's to ensure that never again. So my approach is never again, and not necessary punishment. So even though I would have felt the pain of any Nigerian, which is waiting for the kidnappers to ask you to...
Well, you know those kidnappers kill people.
Obviously
and
they do.
They've done it many, many times. What do you think should happen to those people who have killed someone?
We already have it in the law. That is murder. And incidentally, there is death penalty on murder. So why is the Senate reinventing the wheel? That's the point I'm trying to make.
No. Well, the Senate is going beyond, a bit like when Nigeria came up with the law, the decree, because it was military rule at the time, that if you carry out armed robbery, you will be shot, whether you kill someone or not. That's essentially what the Senate are doing, something similar, that if you kidnap people, you'll be executed, yes, whether or not you actually killed someone in the process of the kidnapping.
Okay.
That is supposed to be a stronger deterrent.
Yes, it's a stronger deterrent. It's the next step from life imprisonment. But my postulation is, if the life imprisonment has not worked, and we are in the 5th year of life imprisonment on kidnapping, it was done by the 9th Senate. So in the last 5 years, the critical question is, are we safer?
Yeah, but people tend to take life imprisonment or prison terms as something that occurs within the realm that we're familiar with, which is our lives and our existence. Death penalty is final. You don't come back from it. And some would argue that imposing the death penalty on kidnappers has potential benefits. The threat of capital punishment may deter potential kidnappers and reduce the number of kidnappings.
I'm not sure. It has been empirically proven. And if you contextualize it from the Nigerian point of view, you would understand that person will say, if you don't die, you don't die. That is different from somebody who goes through a process of imprisonment, life imprisonment. So if we already have a life imprisonment on a crime, it has been proven that escalating it to death penalty would not make any difference, particularly when we are not doing what we need to do to prevent.
Yeah, but as you said, in the Nigerian context, beyond what happens in other climes, I mean, the law hasn't been made yet, so we have no way of measuring it. But let me ask you this before you go, because you are something of an expert when it comes to all these, a lot of things to do with human rights and security and so on. What's your assessment of the measures that have been put in place to tackle this kidnapping and terrorism? Because the thing in the Senate hasn't gone through entirely. One of them is, of course, the state of emergency that was declared on insecurity. And we've seen police officers attached to VIPs being recalled, sent to more vulnerable parts of the country, or at least the proposal is to send them there. What's your reaction to those measures?
I would commend the efforts that is being made to withdraw policemen from individuals and put them in the pool to now serve the country entirely. That's a very good step in the right direction. But again, that will only give us a quantitative advantage, which is just the numbers. We need beyond the numbers. We need the quality and the mandate of the policemen. What is it that they can do different from what they're able to do now? And that now takes us to the state of emergency. I mean, incidentally, the security architecture of Nigeria is not such that a state of emergency verbally suffices. There should be additional actions that are being taken. For instance, what was taken in River State, it wasn't a state of emergency that ended. The president sent a formal communication to the National Assembly for endorsement of action A, B, C, D. So if we are going to declare a state of emergency, the essence it will give us is to limit rights, because because of human rights, certain actions cannot be taken. Yes, the government can limit rights. There are conditions for the limitations of rights. In the first place, it must be by act of National Assembly. Secondly, it must be time-bound. Thirdly, it must be non-discriminatory, and it must be proportionate. So if government wishes, and which I also, I persuade the Minister of Justice to make this advice to the government, if human rights limits, and there's no better day to say this. Today is the World International Human Rights Day, and I am saying, standing on that platform, to say that if human rights, it's the limitations and it's preventing the security organs of Nigeria to achieve the level of dismantling security, it has powers to limit the rights, except that there are conditions that these rights must be clearly disclosed for people to know. For instance, the issue of surveillance. Surveillance relates to right to privacy. I mean, today it is wrong to spy on somebody's call. But if this emergency is lifted, and if this right is declared as one of those to be limited, obviously the security organs can do the needful and prevent this from happening.
Well, we've literally got a minute or so left. Just to summarize your point of view again, so we can leave our viewers with that in mind. In the absence of harsh punishment such as death, what steps would you suggest to the Nigerian government to address kidnapping? Briefly.
Briefly, I want to remind the government of Nigeria that we already have life imprisonment on kidnapping. That is the legal framework. While we still insist on this, because of the global expectation that Nigeria has adopted the moratorium in the last 9 years without an execution. Next year will be the 10th year where it almost becomes like a law. So there are enablers. The first is the use of phone calls for kidnapping purposes in Nigeria. The recklessness is unacceptable. The second is the proliferation of arms. The number of arms illegally in wrong hands can compete with the number of arms that are in circulation with right authorities. That is also wrong. And the third, in terms of the breeders of this, we are dealing with a country with a huge number of out-of-school population. These are kids today. They will be criminals tomorrow. So the country should bear this in mind as we approach and deal with penalty.
Right. Okay. I want to thank you very much indeed for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us. Professor Uche Emelonye is the former UN Human Rights Advisor. He's currently a visiting professor of human rights law at Bournemouth University in the UK. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye. Thank you for watching.